Welcome back, everyone. On Wednesday, President Bola Tinubu fired 5 ministers and nominated 7 in the first major shakeup of his cabinet constituted 14 months ago. The sacked ministers are Uju Kennedy Ohanuye, Women Affairs, Lolade John, Tourism, Professor Tahir Maman, Education, Abdullahi Guzu, State, Housing and Urban Development, and Dr. Jamila Ibrahim, Youth Development. The newly nominated ministers are Dr. Ntawe Yotwadu, Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction, Muhammadu Dinyadi, Labour and Employment, Bianca Ojukwu, State, Foreign Affairs, and Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, Industry, Trade and Investment. Others are Idi Mokhtar, Livestock Development, Yusuf Atta, State, Housing and Urban Development, and Dr. Suwaiba Ahmed, State Education. Tonight, let's now speak with Dr. J.K. Pele, a policy development and advocacy expert. Dr. Pele, good evening to you. Welcome to Politics Tonight. Welcome.
Good evening, beautiful Jumoke.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Pele. So what do you think about this cabinet reshuffle? Was that a kind of shake-up you were expecting? Did it meet your expectation?
Well, it's commendable, the boldness of the president to shake up even people that are close, so to speak, close to him, either politically or socially. His doggedness and willingness to confront people within his own cabinet, unlike his predecessor, who didn't have the boldness to change non-performing ministers. I think this is strategic. It might also showcase some political undertone, but I think it would sort of re-strategize his key priorities, taking into cognizance the 3 major sectors that he focused in either in the appointment or the reassignment, which is education, humanitarian, and economy. I haven't taken my time to research on the pedigree of some of the new ministers, but I did a cursory research a few minutes ago on some of them, and I think the experience of the new Minister for Trade, it's commendable. The experience of the new humanitarian minister, knowing fully well he's coming from the social sector, is also very commendable. Hopefully, he would not repeat the mistake of her predecessor. Another very interesting appointment is within the education sector. I think now we are likely to see very commendable improvement in the education sector with this new minister who seems to know his way around the education sector.
Right, it's interesting to hear you mention doggedness and willingness, because it was precisely August 2023, during the swearing-in ceremony, that President Bola Tinubu made it clear that he had the authority to hire and fire ministers, warning that he would not hesitate to remove those who did not meet expectations. 5 ministers have been sacked, so I do not want to go over their names again because I just did, but some have said it's not a matter of whether or not they deserve to go, but for you, is 1 year enough for them to be appraised?
Absolutely. The ministry arm of the executive is more or less the performing arm of the executive, and if the president feels that they are not meeting their targets in terms of performance, he has every right, constitutionally and morally, to fire them. And like you rightly said, he is the leader of the country. He's the leader of the executive arm of government. He is the CEO of the executive arm, even though he is also the CEO of the entire country. So he has every right to hire and fire. And, you know, I've always been tried to be very objective in my analysis. At this moment, I think he's done the needful. Hopefully, these new ministers will sit up and perform. I would subscribe to him even if he wants to fire every quarter. If you are not a performing minister, you shouldn't be there in the first place. I don't care whether he hires and fires in a week. It doesn't really matter. He's looking for result. And if you're not result-oriented, then you have no business being around governance.
Right. Absolutely, because another question should also be, if indeed the president has enough time to tolerate or accommodate excuses from anyone, the pressure is enormous, and I hear that the president is not done and that there would be a second batch or even a third batch. So for you, please be objective one more time. What ministry or ministries need new ministers? Well,
there are a few more I think deserve this kind of overhaul, especially those that are occupied by known politicians, that some of the antecedents shows.
Dr. Pele, you may be specific.
Jumoke, I will try not to be tonight, but there are a couple of ministries. Again, I'm being metaphorical. You know, they are occupied by professional politicians who they don't seem to have the experience of delivering good governance. You don't need to point accusing fingers, but there are quite a number of them that I feel should go and have a replacement. Otherwise, it will look like it's more of a political interest than governance and growing the economy of the country, which I think the president is passionate about, and he shouldn't gamble with people that will not give him results. People who claim to have supporters in their base, but they don't have the capacity to actually lead and perform, which will be it would be an addition to the president's performance track record. There is no doubt there are some that should go. Many of them are just busy doing nothing.
I like that you've talked about gambling, because some Nigerians have said, as far as we continue with this trial and error, screening ministers without their respective portfolios, we should not expect too much from our ministers. But with a second look at this new set of appointees, is this an indication that the president is rebalancing and optimizing the skills and competencies of his ministers for better performance? For instance, Dr. Doris Anite looks like a new ministry, which is the Ministry of Finance, is a more familiar territory based on her sectoral expertise in the banking sector. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think there's a move by the president to correct the first impression of sending ministers to the National Assembly without portfolio. Honestly, objectively, I wouldn't blame him that much, knowing fully well that he was just coming into government.
And this has been the norm.
Yes. Well, Bola Tinubu from his antecedent, he's not the normal leader. He likes to do something differently and sometimes upset, you know, some area of governance, you know. So, but then give it to him. He was coming into government at the time. He needed to understand the terrain, and of course there were huge political pressure and interest. So he needed to calm the nerves of everybody. I think now he is a bit more settled, and he can take some concrete leadership decision, which we've seen reflecting in these 4 ministers on all the reshufflement. So you see that they were given their portfolios. So now the Senate has no business claiming that they don't know what portfolios these individuals will occupy. They deserve to be drilled, and at the end of the day, if they make it, fine. If they don't, the name of the game is replacement. The president have every right to replace those who can't, who are not able to go through the Senate screening, you know. But I think the Senate should, like we say in Nigeria, shine their eyes and ensure that they probe these individuals in the most dignified way, in the most informative way, making sure that there are no accusations and counter-accusations. Let them go through it, and if they're qualified, then they will recommend Nigerians to hire them.
All right. So, Dr. Pele, let me get your perspectives on one of the ministers whose removal surprised some and not surprising for others. For those surprised, the Minister of Women Affairs, Uju Kennedy, was removed. There is this perception that you cannot lead Nigerians with soft hands. You must be stern for you to take charge of some ministries which some appreciated in how she reacted to issues. Others say for you to continuously reprimand your subordinates for organizing events without your outright approval means you're not in charge. You know, there were other controversial matters, but overall, was it about her personality, or the ministry is just a chaotic one, so to speak?
No, I don't think it's, the ministry is not, Ministry of Women Affairs is not chaotic. I know one minister that that was absolutely in charge, and that was the former Minister of Women Affairs, Pauline Tallinn. I mean, she led that ministry with dignity and pride, and was able to get a lot of international support, you know. Now, when it comes to Barrister Uju, you know, I've encountered her once. Every one of us have different personalities, you know. Unfortunately, some people are not able to keep their certain personalities at home while they are at work. Now, I'm not also a proponent of people pretending to be who they are not, you know. However, when you occupy a government office and a very sensitive ministry like that of Women Affairs, you need to be very, very careful. You need to be a leader, not a manager. You need to have a human face and a human touch in whatever you do. You don't have to advertise your knowledge, you know, the fact that you're very knowledgeable and then any other person is talking nonsense. You have to be very circumspect, very purposeful in whatever you're doing. And I think the former minister, I think, wanted to behave like Dora, the late Dora Akunyili. You know, she wanted to shake up the foundation of the ministry and unearth those who are not doing what they are supposed to do and all that, you know. Jumoke, I'll put it this way. You know, I think in life we need to be sincere, but not sincerely wrong. You know, there are some ways and manner you handle issues and get the support of generality of Nigerians. And there are also some way you handle it and you'll be looked at as one who is high-handed, you know. Sometimes maybe it's her personality, the way and manner she responds to questions in public, the way and manner that she...
All right. Dr. Pelle, let's stay on this.
You know,
and particularly...
can be seen as a bit... Go ahead.
Let's stay on this with particular focus on the ministry, also because some Nigerians think we have not gotten it right with that ministry. And because you've also mentioned one of the predecessors. The Federal Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development is a ministry that should promote the development of women and children in Nigeria, boost the economic empowerment of women. While there have been interventions like the launch of the 1.6 billion Special Intervention Fund for Women Empowerment, and that was as far back as 2016, Nigeria still ranked poorly in women's economic participation. Nigeria ranked 50th in economic participation and opportunity, and 134th in education attainment in the 2022 World Gender Gap Report. You're a policy development expert, so help us. Where are we getting it wrong, policies or implementation?
I would say both. You know, as much as we have very good policies, there are also the need to tweak some of these policies to reflect, one, the verified evidence-based need assessment. The other thing is the way and manner the past minister engaged. And so I would say issues around engagement, you know, when it comes
engagement
to implementation.
With who, Dr. Pelle?
Engagement with critical stakeholders, especially women. Jumoke, you know, this is my tough. I am a he for she, you know. I believe that, look, a woman has incredible potentials. Nigerian women had much more incredible potentials. You know, there are women that are truly doing the work, you know, and how much does this ministry engage them? Because they are the one in the field. They will tell you what the needs are. Many times the problem with non-policymakers and drivers is the fact that they want to do intervention that is not evidence-driven, evidence-based. They want to do intervention just purely from a compassionate aspect, without backing it up with data, without backing it up with situation analysis, you know, without proper articulated vision, without sustainability component, you know. It's okay to do good works, and it's very good to do good works, but when you do good works and that good work is not sustainable, then you won't get the expected result. And those who gave you money will question what you did with their money. So there are issues around policy that needs to be addressed. There are also issues around implementation, you know, and sustainability of whatever they are implementing. If you keep doing a one-off project, you will not get a meaningful impact. Many programs of Ministry of Women Affairs looks to me like a one-off project. Tell me one project. Can you remember one project that the Ministry of Women Affairs have started that is so enduring, trackable, evaluated, and you can pinpoint the result? It'll be difficult. I'm not saying that there may be, but there are very few. If you compare that to the amount of resources that government puts in that ministry, I believe that they can do better. So the problem is there are policies that needs to be rejigged and tweaked. Their implementation methodology needs an absolute overhaul, And then, of course, their sustainability and evaluation methods also needs to be looked into. I believe that this minister, if he wants to succeed, it's important for her to look at the entire drawing board, and be bold to say, this is not working, scrap it. Let's see how we can inject more fund in this particular intervention. Everything about women is not about empowerment. Take them to one workshop, teach them to make baskets and all that. That's much more than that. There has to be a strategic, sustainable project that will be the attraction of funding partners. And the funding partners will put money there.
All right, Dr. Pele, let's go on a break. And when we come back, we will continue with this particular conversation. Please stay with us, everyone. Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Tonight, we're reviewing President Tinubu's cabinet shakeup, and I've been speaking with Dr. J.K. Pele. Dr. Pele, thank you so much for staying with us on the program. Now, let's continue with the Ministry of Women Affairs, and I'd like for us to put this conversation into proper perspective, basically because I'm a woman, and I'm very concerned about this. Now, apart from engagement with critical stakeholders, apart from, you've talked about implementation methodology, what else must change? Because as we speak, the ministry is currently headed by Imam Suleiman Ibrahim. Women and children must begin to see impactful changes, implementation of all of these policies. For maternal mortality, Nigeria follows India as the two leading nations where mothers and their babies are most likely to die. We've had issues with stalled gender equality bills. The growing number of out-of-school girls in Nigeria is another major issue. For you, would you agree with me that it can't be about policies anymore?
Yeah, I mean, Jumoke, I'm equally interested in that ministry as well as what they do, because, like I said, I'm a he for she, and I believe that women should be given the opportunity and they deserve so that they can flourish. That said, I think the other component of what I think the ministry can do is to look into project design, the design of their project, and it must be driven by data and situation analysis as well as needs assessment. You don't just try to intervene for people you don't know what their needs are. And to be able to do that, you need a critical stakeholders mapping so that you can know who are your primary stakeholders, who are your secondary stakeholders. Bring everybody to the table and put out the things you want to do and allow them to contribute to those things. And then come back and meet with technical experts who would design that project, in such a way that it will meet both the national and international yardstick for project design. Once you do that, you must also take into cognizance how you're going to fund your project. Because if you have a very good project that is not bankable, is not fundable, then you will not be able to attract funding, both from the international community as well as the national budget. Now, but if you have a very good project, well designed, that is inclusive, you talked about children, it's almost like Ministry of Women Affairs is only for just aged or maybe middle class women. They don't have a vibrant youth women driven project, youthful women, and that of children, they barely do things for children. They have social welfare. It's not only meant for settling quarrel and disputes between families and bringing children back. It has to have a concrete, impactful project that will address the needs of the entire women folk.
All right. All right, Dr. Pele, thank you for your perspective. I mean, it was important to stay on that for a minute because globally, women account for 38% of human capital wealth. But in low and middle income countries like Nigeria, women account for 1/3 or lower of the wealth, and we cannot continue like this. But how do you evaluate the reactions generated as a result of the creation of the Ministry of Regional Development to oversee or supervise the Ministry of Niger Delta Development and other regional commissions in the country? Some South-South stakeholders are alleging that the federal government was planning to use the resources of the South-South zone to fund other zonal development commissions. Meanwhile, Abubakar Momo says it's just a change of nomenclature and, of course, expansion of activities of the ministry. You're from the South-South, so what was your first reaction to that?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, change of nomenclature or bringing a new name or a new face doesn't really matter to me, as long as that institution will perform, as long as that institution will serve the needs of the people, as long as that institution will localize her operation to meet the needs of the rural dwellers. And most of these other ministries, Ministry of Niger Delta and all that, existed only by name. I haven't seen a very impactful intervention within the zone that these creations have been able to affect. And I think that includes the NDDC, these are institutions that is been politicized. Many of them are just repeating projects, very many of them are just awarding contracts to their friends and family members, their daughters and their sons, and oftentimes they don't even do the job of which millions and billions have been given to them. So whether it is the regional development ministry or whatever ministry it is, as long as they serve the people, then it's commendable. This problem of using ethnicity to divide us and insisting it has to be this, what is in a name? If that name doesn't have an identity and does not meet the needs of the people, it really doesn't matter. I'm not in that class that is raising dust about creation of that. If it's created and it's serving generality of the people, who cares? Let it be.
All right. Let's talk about other appointments. A very key hire or appointment is the appointment of a Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Eradication. The ministry is a very key ministry that should have been driving the support of the vulnerable in the country. Well, in the absence of the minister, Mr. President has been providing most of the support and interventions through to the governors, which, in my view, have not been getting to those who really need them. And now Mr. President now has a minister who will oversee the ministry. How much of a data-driven, transparent, and impactful administration are you looking forward to, in line with the vision of Mr. President?
Well, I think in the first place, I would call on Mr. President to release the report of all the committees that were set up that investigated what happened. The problem with us in this country is that even when we throw in the open people who have violated one rule or the other and carted away taxpayers' funds. We don't reprimand anybody. We don't. There is no cases of one person prosecuted and sent to jail. You know, what happened to all that billions that we heard that the past minister and all the previous ones had to deal with? You know, there were reports. Those reports need to come out in the open so that we know who is wrong. However, this current minister, you know, will have a lot to do. I was one of those who called on Mr. President to pause all the intervention program and rejig them and re-strategize. And I'm glad that he listened, you know. However, this new minister needs to be very careful, you know, and be willing to roll her sleeves and go to work and leave photo ops, you know, and leave trying to impress anybody, you know. We don't need one who will come and speak grammar, you know, and will not substantiate it with performance. We need
talking about performance, Dr. Pele, talking about performance, I want you to speak directly to the new minister. When it comes to policies, I mean, on the expected people-friendly policies to address poverty at this time where over 100 million Nigerians are dimensionally poor.
Well, Jumoke, I was coming to that point you raised, and that's the point of using data to drive intervention. Take, for instance, the cash transfer. You know, there is this very dangerous claim that, oh, we've reached over 20 million marginalized groups and vulnerable groups. And that's lies. Absolute lies. You know, they didn't reach anybody. You know, there is no accurate data, verifiable data in Ministry of Humanitarian and Social Development. I don't think so. I don't think they've invested in what they can beat their chest to say is an accurate, verifiable data. You know, working in silos will not help us. There's a need for this current minister, because I know one thing I cannot be on national television and say otherwise is the fact that this president is compassionate. He wants to reach the most vulnerable. You know, he's done it even when he wasn't in office. I have talked to friends that have benefited from either his school fees and all that, and now that he's in office, he's in a better position to do more. Ministry of Humanitarian should not disgrace this administration. They should sit back and do the work and work with stakeholders that have a track record of performance. Work with stakeholders that are willing to work without even being paid. I tried to do that with the minister before better. You know, I was willing to serve, and I told her I don't want to be paid. You know, and I was willing to bring my little experience and design what I know I've been able to do in my organization that attracted international funding. And that is still doable till date. There are funding partners that are taking their money back to their country because it's not used. Because their money must be used for what they budgeted for. And this ministry should prepare herself to do that. Let me also sound a note of warning. The Ministry of Humanitarian is not an NGO. If you want to now compete with NGOs that you should work with so that they can attract funding and be able to account for that funding to those who funded them and help you grow the ministry and the ministry's projects. If you want to then compete with them and want the European Union, for instance, to give you money to do something, you say it, to give you, you won't get as much as the local credible NGOs are getting. So work with credible organizations, NGOs. Now, what makes a credible NGO? Watch how many partners are willing to give them their money to go out there and intervene for them. Many of them have been giving huge portfolios, and they are delivering. If they are not delivering, they will not win that project over and over and over again. You know, so it's important that the ministry take into account the people that they can work with. If they are willing to come clean, if they are willing to be transparent, if they are willing to engage the best and not their brothers and sisters that they want to patronize with contracts, then they will make progress and they will serve. My greatest pain, Jumoke, is that these most vulnerable individuals that are there, Nigerians that are dying of hunger, with all these billions, these people are taking advantage of them. And you know, there's always God in heaven. There's no way you can cheat the poor and go scot-free. It's not possible. So if they want to really, really make this president proud, you know, because he's voting a lot of resources to intervene for the most vulnerable, then they should roll their sleeves and go to work. Work with the right person. If you're not willing, if you think you're the type that will not be criticized, I'm going to put my eyes on that ministry and I will make sure that I constructively, I'll say it again, constructively criticize them where I have to. And I would profoundly praise them where I have to. I give you that promise.
All right, Dr. Pele, perhaps it's important for you, at this point, to speak to the need for effective interagency collaboration and coordination, which looks like a critical success factor for the newly reinvigorated FEC in terms of strategy and policy making.
Absolutely. This cohesion is absolutely, nobody works in silos anymore. You know, I'm a Christian. The Bible says two are better than one. For when they come together, they make profit. They make progress. The whole world is going collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. So the agencies must collaborate. They must come together. There is no point trying to repeat what this person is doing when all you would have done is to put that resources into one ministry that is doing exactly the same thing that your ministry wants to do. We don't have to replicate. I'll give you one best practice. I saw many times Pauline come to the Education Council, the Council on Education, you know, to pitch for support. I saw her work, and that's the former Minister for Women Affairs, you know. As far as I'm concerned, in the past history of all the women affairs, Pauline comes top, you know. She was willingly collaborating effectively. Ministry of Women Affairs has a lot to do with Ministry of Humanitarian. They must work together. They have a lot to do with Ministry of Youth Development. They must work together. They have a lot to do with Ministry of Education. They must work together. There must be this coalition. There must be this, they need to learn to coerce so that they can produce the expected result. Now, my mantra is this: I don't care who gets the job done. Let the job be done. And I think that should be the aspirations. Every minister must have this vision that, look, I'm willing to go to Ministry of Trade, collaborate with them, you know, and make sure that women have access to finance, financial inclusion. You cannot drive financial inclusion in Ministry of Women Affairs all by yourself. You need Ministry of Finance. You need the CBN. You know, I saw Pauline go on courtesy visits to her fellow ministers, you know, and I think these other ministers, we need to see that. We need to see the Minister of Works go on a courtesy visit to the Minister of Housing. They have to work together.
Absolutely. You know, just like I said last night, and I will ask again, perhaps, just maybe I may get a different perspective. You know, when it comes to cutting the cost of governance, and with Mr. President's demonstrable capacity to bite the bullet, he took some decisions in January, and yesterday he restricted ministers of state and heads of agency of the federal government to a maximum of 3 vehicles in their official convoy. But there are those who raised concerns about whether or not we need ministers of state at all. But for you, how easy is it to manage the size of government? Would you say it's an idea that we must consciously realize and imbibe in this part of the world?
I think, Jumoke, it's important to also look at the processes that one needs to, or the president must take in actually addressing the issue of this over-bloated government. One is the law. Some of these ministries, are they established by law? And will the law allow Mr. President to collapse them? I think we need to look at that, you know, strategically. However, cutting the number of people traveling with ministers or even the president and the vice and all that, I don't think, yes, it will save us some cost, but it won't be that much. I think we need to look more into processes, processes within ministry, how they carry out their work, how many people are doing the work. So it's not only on the politicians and what they do, how many cars they drive. That is also important, you know. But also within the ministry, are we overstaffed in some places? Because have you ever visited ministries during working hours? You will see people sleeping. That means they don't have
Dr.
work.
Pele, are you on the side of those periscoping the idea of e-governance? Can it work in a country like Nigeria?
It's working in many ministries. I can tell you, I can name. The head of service have perfected that. There is no paperwork in her ministry, in her office. It's absolutely e-office. So if one who oversees the entire ministry has perfected that, I don't see any reason why the other, in fact, let me say to you, Jumoke, that I was part of the National Council on Education. For the first time in the history of the council, we had e-council. There was no paper. Paper was not distributed to anybody, you know. And you can imagine the cost of. I have made policies for Ministry of Education. Sometimes you have to produce 300, 400, 500 copies of a particular policy. Think of the huge resources, you know. In my own case, I was getting the funding to fund those policies. The ministry, I've never received a dime from any ministry for anything I do. But we support several ministries across board, you know. However, there are ministries today that have perfected e-office, e-operations, you know, totally and absolutely paper-free. So it's doable.
right, Dr. Pele. Let me thank you very much for your perspective on this particular conversation tonight. It's an interesting conversation and very educative. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Dr. Shakeup is a policy development expert. Thank you so much for joining us. Please have a great weekend.
Thank you, Jumoke. Sometimes you don't even know it's 1 hour.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. And thank you so much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone.